Hey again, welcome back for part 2 of this conversation with Rebekka Lord-Johnson. It is so good. I'm glad you came back for part 2. Enjoy. Welcome to The Composed Artist, the podcast where we explore the intersection of artistry, entrepreneurship, and self-improvement and continue to pursue a more composed life. I'm your host, Stephanie, an artist specializing in live wedding painting, living in the vibrant and soulful city of New Orleans. Over the past decade, my job has taken me all over the world, meeting and creating art in front of thousands of people, and has allowed me to create a colorful life for myself and my family. Now, I help other artists build confidence, develop their techniques, and fall in love with the art of live wedding painting. I invite you to join us for inspiring stories of creative journeys, practical tips for running a successful art business, and honest conversations about the joys and challenges of running a studio and being a parent. This podcast is here to keep you company, keep you entertained, and is full of resources to help you on your journey to create a business that feeds your soul, makes an impact, and is insanely profitable. The Composed Artist is the podcast for the bold, creative, passionate, and genuine artist. Let's get started. That's beautiful. And now you have a daughter and you are a mom. So any tips for those of us who are creative entrepreneurs who are balancing motherhood and family life? Because it's not just motherhood, you're a spouse and the guys they deserve attention too,
Yeah, I definitely have some advice. I think you probably have even more advice because you've got 3 kids. So my
Yes,
advice
but
is
it's always different.
I think we always have to remember, and this is my crossing the road theory as well. If someone sees you crossing the road, and you've crossed the road at the wrong time, doesn't mean they're going to run you over with the car just because you're on the road. They'll probably put their brakes on. So that's my theory in life. So if you have just had a baby or you're in a period of time where life is a bit hectic, you have to remember that your clients are still people too, and they're going to be a lot more understanding than you think. There's always the positive sandwich when I'm writing my emails.
Yeah.
So that what's not read is I'm really struggling, I'm having a hard time. It's more so I want to make sure that your painting gets all the love it deserves. So I'm going to need an extra 3 weeks to work on it, but I'll be in touch when it's ready for you. And often no one's going to complain if you put in extra time. It's when you rush things that the wheels fall off, for me anyway. So always be transparent with your clients, but also I have written into my contract that my paintings take up to 12 weeks to be complete. They never have. They're always so much quicker than that, but I put in 12 weeks to give myself grace. And it's the whole theory of, what is it? Under promise, over deliver.
Yeah.
So people expect 12 weeks, it's finished in 8. They're over the moon. But I also have in my contract that if it needs more time than 12 weeks, I'll be in touch. I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted. And when I had to cancel weddings because I found out I was pregnant, that was the scariest moment of my life. And I don't think I will ever be scared of receiving an email ever again after going through that. And you actually helped me. You sent me what you sent to your clients. I remember that.
Because I've had to do that 3 times.
Yeah. And then I tweaked it and sent it off to my clients. And out of I think it was 17 weddings I had to cancel. And I think my last wedding was 4 weeks before my due date, and my first one back was 7 weeks after. Can't do maths on the spot. A little over 2.5 months.
Girl, you canceled 17 weddings in 2.5 months. That's insane.
Yeah.
Wow.
Before I had my daughter, I was doing, I think it was between 8 and 10 weddings a month, and it was too much. And I was absolutely swamped with paintings.
Mm-hmm.
Now I cap it at about 6 weddings a month. That's sort of my comfort zone now. And it's so important to me to keep those boundaries, because so many times, like, someone who inquires with me, they write, I'm getting married in 2025 and I'm booked out for 2025. And then they'll write me this like super beautiful love story, and like that they've just gotten engaged and they've been following me for a while. And then I'm like, okay, I'll paint your wedding. And then, you know, because my workload, I'm swamped again. So I have to be really careful to keep those boundaries in place. Especially now that I'm balancing, you know, time with my husband, time with my daughter, all those things. Yeah. My husband and I spend a lot of time together. After our daughter goes to bed, that's like our, you know, block of undisturbed 2.5 hours before bed. But yeah, it's definitely challenging, but it's doable. And I feel like I must have wasted so much time before I had a daughter, because I don't remember a time when I had like 4 hours after work. Like, what was that? 4 hours to myself. What? But I've also never been so productive in my entire life. 2 weeks ago, I got down to 0 paintings in the studio. 0 for the first time in 3 years. Yeah, the whole time I've been doing this. And I know that doesn't sound like a big deal to the wedding painters who finish on site.
Oh no, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Because I've been there.
Oh, well, when I think it was, how many months ago? I think it was June. I was severely unwell for 3 months. It was when my daughter started.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Daycare. Yeah.
You were sick.
I was so sick. And like every single story I was doing, I'm like, I'm still sick, guys. I'm still sick.
Mm-hmm.
So
I remember.
I started off with, too much information, gastro, and then I got sinusitis, and then I got COVID, and then the sinusitis from the COVID turned into a secondary infection. And then I didn't realize, but I got RSV. My RSV test came back positive, and then I simultaneously had pneumonia. So I was sick for 3 months. Like, Rebekka, I was breathing through the pain in my studio, and I had 17 paintings to finish. And I was like, not in a good place at all.
Oh my God. I would have quit. I believe I would have quit. I believe I would have
I did every single
everyone.
Wedding. I did every wedding. And I found out I tested positive for COVID after the weddings that I'd done. But because I knew I was so sick, I was not getting close to anyone. When people were coming up to my easel, I was like, just letting you know. Same with all my clients. I'm like, I'm not hugging you. I'm not getting anywhere near you. I'm staying away. But yeah, I don't know if you have pseudoephedrine in the States.
What is that?
It's a very powerful medication to help with congestion. But I have a very bad response to it, and my heart goes really fast, and it feels like I'm like running on a treadmill. So I did a wedding with a resting heart rate of 125 beats per minute because I needed the pseudoephedrine to get through. Like, it was just a lot. And I think when people join this industry, they don't realize that it is someone's wedding day. It's their one day, and you can't just, I mean, you can if you're on death's door, but like, you know, you can't just call in sick and be like, oh, sorry. You know, especially in Melbourne.
The stakes are so high. Yeah, the stakes are so high. The only thing that keeps me, I guess, clear in the head when it comes to canceling weddings around a due date is because my first, I painted up to 2 weeks before the due date. And then I had a wedding 2 weeks after. So I was... You know, when you're, I did it because I had to, because I'm glad I didn't have to cancel. I don't think I had to cancel any. Maybe I had to cancel one for the first one. But I remember saying, never again. This is not healthy. This is not, I'm in so much pain. I'm in so much discomfort. The painting is suffering. I must look terrible, you know, like I can't, this is not worth it at all. And so then it made it easier to remind myself, you don't want to do that. You said you would never do that. And so, but I mean, I think the only wedding I canceled from sickness, I had 2. One, I found out I had COVID, and I was in the depths of the illness when I took the test. And it was 2 days before the wedding. And so I did email and say, I'm so sorry. And it was in January of 2021. So it was still people were in that world. And they were like, well, if you have it, don't come. It's okay.
Yeah.
And then the second time I literally woke up at like 6 o'clock in the morning of the wedding and was throwing up. And I had to call
Oh,
her. I felt worse about this than sending those emails, but I had to
yeah.
call, and I called the bride. I didn't call, she didn't
Yeah.
have a planner. I called the bride on the morning of her wedding, and I was like, there's absolutely no way around this, but I can't, I can't be there.
Yeah. I
Because I think it was like a 2-hour drive away too. So it
yeah.
wasn't even just right there. I would have had to. It
So
was
I've
horrible, and I
also
didn't want to
cancelled
do
one for COVID when like it was we were in the thick of it. Like everyone was
that. Mhm.
terrified of COVID. I cancelled one then. But same experience as you, except I got sick at the wedding. I don't know if you ever saw my posts about that, but I came down with food poisoning while I was at the wedding, and I was 2 hours from home. So it was Easter weekend. So I'd driven 2 hours up, and my mum, when I have a wedding on a weekend and my husband's working, she comes and looks after my baby, and she brings me a packed lunch. Like it's the cutest thing ever.
Oh, I love that.
So this one day she had packed me like a punnet of raspberries. And I did not know this at the time, but they're one of the highest food poisoning foods because they carry listeria. Had no idea. She
Ooh.
had no idea. She didn't
I
wash
didn't
them.
know.
But, well, there you go. Berries are apparently really high. Same with like lettuce and things like that. Anyway, I ate this punnet of berries. And then I went down to the ceremony, and I was watching the ceremony, ready to get my shot and stuff. And I had the worst headache. I was like, this is a bit weird. Head back to my easel to start painting. And I was like, oh, I just feel a bit strange. So I went and got some lemonade. I thought maybe like I had low blood sugar or something. And the lemonade didn't help. And then entree was served. I ate entree, felt a bit queasy, kept going to the bathroom because I was like, oh, I feel a bit
Oh no.
dizzy. And at this stage, it's like 5 o'clock. I'm booked until 9 o'clock. And main is served. And I sat down for my main and I took one look at it and I had no appetite. And I was like, uh-oh, I'm in a bad situation because I never do not have an appetite unless I'm going to be sick. And I go back to my easel and I start getting like that salivation and tunneling of the vision.
Yes.
And I call the venue manager over. He turns on the aircon. Like I am trying to power through this painting and I'm just breathing, and guests are coming up and talking to me. And I rewatched the guest reactions from this. You could not tell I was struggling at all. I don't know what face I plastered on, like this like smiley, happy face. But there's this moment I turned to the photographer. She's like, oh my gosh, I love the painting. And I was like, I'm about to be sick. And she was like, whoa, what are you talking about? And I'm like, no, this is really bad. So it gets to 7:30 at this stage, and you just see me. I turn off my guest reactions and I leave the venue. And I got locked in the venue because I went out a door that wasn't open, and I'm like trying to get out, and I'm like, I'm about to be sick everywhere. Anyway, I figured out how to unlock the door, and I was on my hands and knees out the front of the venue vomiting. So traumatic. And I'm trying to call my husband and I'm in tears because I don't know what to do. And after that bout of vomiting's ended, I run and find the venue manager and I tell him what's happened. He used to be a photographer. He's like the best person ever. And he's like, look, it's happened to me before. You're just going to have to let the bride and groom know. And I'm like, I feel so bad. Like I still had an hour and a half of painting left. The painting was definitely suffering because I was going so much slower than usual. And the bride and groom come around the corner as I'm speaking to him, and I just blurt out, I'm like, I'm really sick. And they're like, whoa, what? And I'm like, oh, I've just been sick. I'm really sorry. I think I'm going to have to go. And I was so scared because it was 2 hours home and it's all tunnels. There's nowhere to pull over, just all freeways. And the bride and groom were both, I think they were either both nurses or one was a paramedic and one was a nurse. And they were like, oh, no. Like you're allowed to have sick days too. And I almost started crying because I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so seen. Like, oh yeah. So anyway, I pack up all my things. The venue sends me off with a bottle of sparkling water. Like they were so nice just for the trip home because they knew I had ages to drive. And it was like Easter traffic too, like people moving out of the city, and it was just so much. Anyway, I end up on my hands and knees vomiting again as I'm packing the car, and the father of the bride walks past and he gives me this look, and I'm like, he has no idea what's happening. This looks so bad. And immediately I was so worried that I looked unprofessional and all of these things, and it was just so awful. But anyway, I made it home. And because I was breastfeeding at the time, I still needed to pump when I got home, so I couldn't take the anti-nausea medication. So I was waiting, and my husband was so worried about me. I made it all the way home without vomiting, but as soon as I got home, it was just everywhere. It was not good.
Yeah.
So I pumped, put the milk on the bench. My husband's like, don't worry about it. I'll deal with it. Gave me the anti-nausea pill, immediately threw that up. So he gave me another one. Anyway, I woke up in the morning after being sick all night and he forgot to put my breast milk away. And I almost lost priorities.
Murder.
Oh,
Murder.
literally. But yeah, I do not blame you from cancelling that wedding, from throwing up, because it is, I think that's the worst situation you can be in. Like having done a wedding with RSV, like with a racing heart rate and coughing and spluttering behind my easel. Yeah, being sick at a wedding. Oh, awful.
So anyone listening, please understand how seriously we take this job and our responsibility to create your masterpiece. We will stay there at it. And then whenever you're pumping, whenever you're in that very long period of life, you're concerned about calorie intake and energy, and then drinking all this water, and then you have to stop frequently to pump. And that's also a full-time job. And I'm proud of, pat yourself on the back that we made it through pumping. My goodness.
Pumping at weddings is a whole other ordeal. Isn't it?
I really love the Mamava pods in the airports. Do they have those in Australia?
No, but I think I've heard of them. Is that where it's just for expressing?
It's just for, well, you can nurse too, but it's like this pod that they just put in the walkway off to the, against the wall or whatever, but it's big enough for two people to walk in and sit kind of facing each other. Usually there's just one. I've always only ever been just by myself. But I've never traveled with any of my babies, but you have to pull, you have got to stop and pump, and then you can eat and you can just scroll through Instagram, and you don't have to be in a bathroom stall, which is the alternative, which I've done many times. And, transferring milk from bottles to bags over a toilet. It's just
it's too much.
It's so stressful. It's too much.
And you're counting every mil. You can't lose any. It's just,
it all counts. It's gold, liquid gold.
Yes.
I feel this shared experience. I feel a shared experience with the live wedding painting gig, working in this industry, being a mom, doing the nursing thing. This is wonderful. This is great. We can both sit here and just look at each other and say,
we get it.
I get it.
Same experience.
But in everything, I mean, I think it's been completely rewarding, like Ikigai, going back to that, very rewarding in a way that I never imagined when I was growing up, Oh, that's amazing.
It's so funny. When I was working in an office, like in the construction industry, I used to look out the window and I would watch the sunset from this like building. I was on the second story, and I used to always...
Amazing.
Yeah, well, it was amazing, but it was every day was like this moving moment for me. And I'd always turn to my colleague, who was a very good friend, and I'd say, surely this can't be it for us. Surely we just don't just do this for another like 40 years or 30 years. Like I can't imagine doing this. I used to say to her, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. This isn't where I'm supposed to be. And when I first took off, I had one viral post, and it was crazy. I think I booked, from memory, it was about 72 weddings in 3 months. So that's when I first went viral. So I booked out like my first full year within 3 months. Insanity looking back. That is absolutely crazy. And I was still working full time. I had my own social media marketing business, and I was planning my own wedding. And I swear that was the most full-on time of my life, because I was working 7 days a week, and I was building a house, the house that I'm in now. So I was doing so much all at once. At least I wasn't pregnant as well. The wheels would have fallen off everywhere. But I was so willing to make this work. I was literally, working my 9 to 5, doing my social media posts for my clients. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I was painting weddings. And then I'd get home at like 1 a.m. And then I would wake up at 6 a.m. to go to work the next morning and start all over again. And I did that for about 3 months before I quit my job. I was like, this is too much. And I quit my job like 2 weeks before the wedding. And we signed the contracts for our house 2 weeks before the wedding as well. And there was just so much so much going on. But I remember when those first few videos went viral and I went into the office, and it was a very strange shift for me because I feel like people perceived me a little bit differently. But at first, everyone was like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. What you're doing is so cool. And then when things started gaining more traction, I had colleagues being like, are you actually doing this though? Like, is this real? And I had them questioning me, and it was such an unusual experience because some of these videos were getting millions of views. And I was like, this is so strange to have, people wondering if it's real. By the way, it's all real. It's 100%
Yeah, like
all real.
what's real? Like
what?
doing the actual paintings, or they think you're like faking it somehow, or like making a photograph or something?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. But it was the most unusual experience. But I remember that last day in the office, I watched the sunset for the last time because it was in autumn. So the sun was setting at like 5 o'clock. And I was like, oh my gosh, this never has to happen again, I hope. But yeah, walking out of there, I was like, I finally feel like where I'm supposed to be in life. And it was just the best feeling ever. That drive home, I was like, yes.
Oh my
God.
Good. It's like, that's like the ending to a movie, although the best part was just beginning.
Yeah, literally. It's like a classic 2000s movie. Except when they're walking away from the high school or something.
You may have heard me talk about my little side business, my little fine art print shop. I create an original painting, I take a photo of it, and I print it, and I print it again and again and again. I make hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars a year on prints. It's so easy. And I learned everything I know about creating my own prints and printing them in-house from Lori-Ann Gonzalez and her Art to Print course. I highly recommend, if you are an artist and you want to make easy money from your original works and even the commission works, you can resell those as prints. I recommend you check out Art to Print. Lori-Ann has a very direct way of teaching, and you are really going to appreciate her no fluff method of giving you information and telling you exactly what you need to do to make making fine art prints in your own studio a breeze. You can check her out online at learn.loriannart.com. That's learn at LAURIEANNEART.com, or just click the link in the show notes for my affiliate link. Check her out and thank me later. What a whirlwind 3 years. I mean, a lot happened before that. You have a great story. Great story. This is very fun. Thanks for sharing it with us.
Oh, it's okay.
So I know that to pivot a little bit, you used your talents in drawing, your like experience and your skill with graphite drawing to kind of roll right into live wedding painting. And that helped you tremendously, your knowledge and your skill in like your technical ability. What is a skill from one of your many past jobs and all the hats that you wore? What's a skill that you learned in a previous job that helped prepare you for running a business, being a creative today?
I have two. Can I share two? Two skills.
I suppose.
So first one, marketing, 100%. I think I owe a lot of my success to the marketing because part of the trouble is getting your name out there in the first place. So that's definitely one. But probably even bigger than that is customer service and client relations. So when I was in the construction industry, I worked a lot in sales and marketing. So I would work with clients all the way from the beginnings of their home building journey all the way up to the end, and maintaining that good relationship, getting to the nitty gritty of who someone is and making them feel comfortable instantly. So important because you're working with them on the day and you've never met them before. You need them to feel comfortable expressing concerns to you. And sharing things like, what they're insecure about on their face or something like that. They need to be comfortable. You know what? Business admin as well. I did a lot of admin in my job, and it's one of those things, you can be a great artist, doesn't mean you're a great business person. And unfortunately, to do what we do, you kind of need to wear many hats. In fact, you really need to wear many hats. You need to be amazing at customer service, fantastic at marketing, really, really good at painting. I think some people unfortunately see wedding painting as something kitsch or trendy when it is actually a very specialized form of fine art. It sort of goes fine art where you're in a studio or something, and then branching upwards off that is live painting. It's not a case of here's fine art and here's live painting, and they're two totally separate things, and you don't need to be as good as of a fine artist to be a live wedding painter. It's actually you need to be a better fine artist to be a live wedding painter. So definitely need those skills. But yeah, you also need really good admin, knowledge of contracts, knowledge of invoicing, time management. Like there's everything. There are so many hats that we wear. So it's a very hard one to answer. I've given you like 10 things.
Yeah, they're all right though. They're all correct. Are you still using cheap art supplies? Look, you don't have to tell me, but if you want to level up, you have to use better supplies. Come on, let's invest a little. I've been using Rosemary and Company for my paintbrushes for the past 5 years or so, and I have never thrown away one of these brushes. The quality is unmatched, and they're like reasonably priced. I hate to say it, but they're the best. So I love a long handled paintbrush. Okay. I love a hog hair or an ivory, which is kind of a mixed bristle hair. And Rosemary and Company, they have like so many options. So I would check them out. The website is www.rosemaryandco.com. That's Rosemary spelled Rosemary and co.com. Or you can just click the link in my show notes and it'll take you directly to my personal wish list. It's all the brushes that I use and recommend. So check them out and thank me later. On that note, I'm going to jump around a little bit. I've got a couple of questions that I like to ask everybody because they're just like, I'm curious, honestly, for selfish reasons. But you listed like a 10, like you said, you were very generous with your skills that you learned. Now, pertaining to those, what advice do you have in terms of like, how do you get more skilled as a fine artist in order to improve your live wedding paintings? How do you improve your marketing skills? Give us a little gem. You don't have to give 10.
Okay. So to improve your marketing skills, I'll start there. Don't be afraid to try things, because if you don't try things, you'll never realize what works. So when I first started doing my little voiceovers, I don't know if anyone was doing voiceovers and stories to wedding paintings. And I think now it's quite common. Like I think before it was more time lapses and like trendy music with snippets of the wedding. So if I'd never sort of strayed away from what was being done, I never would have experienced that and realized that that is something that works. So don't be afraid to post. Don't be afraid to try new things. Don't always try to be too trendy, but also remember that your content should inspire, educate, or entertain. So I try to hit all three with my different forms of content. Some of my content is purely just to show the client experience for my clients. Other is purely entertainment, and other things I post are inspiring. So yeah, with marketing, don't be afraid to post. You'll figure out what works, and it's okay not to be like everyone else. It's what will make you unique.
And I have to add that for anyone listening and who's paying attention, not once did she say anything about selling. You don't necessarily have to sell a product to have you be effective. Effective. It's the end of the day, girl. My brain cells are done. You don't have to sell by saying, hire me, in order to be effective on social media with marketing.
And because my background was sales, and I was one of the top sales associates at my building company. But the thing is, I never sold anything to anybody. I showed them. If you show the product, you need to give them the space to fall in love with it. If you go, buy this, you cut them off at the knees and they'll never fall in love with it because they feel pressured. It's just not a nice experience. So I always ever show people. And if people are inquire with me, I don't often follow up with them. But it is also because I'm spoiled with a lot of inquiries, but I don't often follow up with them unless I really feel like they were really engaged in that conversation we had, or really want a live wedding painting and maybe, funds aren't available at the moment, or, there's myriad of things that can happen. But yeah, I agree with you. Don't sell anything. Don't sell on social media. It's not the time or space. Yeah, just show people.
But that's a selling strategy.
It is,
You know,
yeah.
like that's the strategy with it, and it's effective, and it requires patience, and it
Yeah.
requires authenticity,
Yes,
and
definitely. Definitely.
you have both.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And regarding fine art, regarding be like improving your
hmm
skills as an artist, what do you think?
This one's really hard for me to answer, because I'm always, how do I explain this? Even when I'm not painting, I try to view the world through the lens as if I'm going to paint it. So what I mean by that, you're nodding. I feel like you understand. If I'm going for a walk
Yep.
outside with my husband, I'm looking around, and it just happens naturally. I'm like, oh, what would I mix to create that color? And I'm like making a little recipe in my mind. I might observe something and say, oh, well, that atmospheric perspective is really nice. And I can like pick a color swatch from what I'm looking at in the distance and one up close and compare them. That's just something that I've always sort of been able to do. Um, but yeah, change how you observe the world, and you'll start observing things like your reference photos differently, because you need to observe real life to fully understand perspective and atmospheric perspective and how the light changes on certain things. If you're always looking at like a reference photo, you're not really going to understand that outside of the reference photo itself. Sometimes I play around with the lighting in paintings and it's not even in my reference photo. I just draw
Yeah.
out things, or I make things deeper just because I know that's how it would behave if a camera hadn't captured it. Yeah, and I guess going back to the marketing thing as well, don't be afraid to try new things. If the way you're painting a tree isn't working for you, it doesn't mean you have to hop onto YouTube and see how someone else is painting a tree. If you actually watch me paint, I kind of take the energy of what I'm painting and transfer it to my wrist. I don't know if that is making sense, but if I'm painting a tree and it's got erratic leaves that don't make much sense, I'm not painting each individual leaf. It's more of like a scribbly
Mm-hmm.
kind of technique.
Oh, for sure. Whereas if
Yeah,
it were a satin gown, it
it's
would be
more
much more
flowy.
fluid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but don't always focus on the small details as well. That's another thing. You put the most detail in the focal point of the painting. Not everything has to be fully detailed, otherwise it becomes overworked very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very good advice. Be selective about where you're going to put detail,
Mm-hmm.
and then light, color, value.
Yeah.
More so light and value, like you were
Mm-hmm.
saying earlier.
Yeah, because
Do you
detail.
use do you use a limited palette?
I do. I've got my, again, if you're listening, I'm about to show my palette. It's very messy at the moment, but you can see I only really have 6 colors on there at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's very messy. You can't really see them. But I have 2 yellows, 2 reds, a blue, a green, black and white.
Do you use a burnt umber or a burnt sienna? Any
Oh
of
yeah,
those like
burnt
earthy
sienna. I
tones?
use burnt sienna.
Mm, yeah.
Sometimes I use a burnt umber, but I find that I can create burnt umber really well just by mixing a blue tone burnt sienna and maybe a touch of black. I can make a burnt umber. But yeah, most of my colors I mix from that.
Something that a lot of people don't realize is that using a limited palette, I know that there's so many beautiful colors and so many really interesting and attractive tubes in the art store,
hmm
and I have a lot of them, and I'll supplement, like if I feel like if there's a lot of red roses,
hmm
I'll crack out like red instead of
Yeah,
alizarin crimson or
some
whatever.
magenta.
Um, yeah, like sometimes you need a teal, and you don't
Yeah.
necessarily want to mix that. But using like limiting your palette creates a challenge that will help you grow as if you were lifting heavier weights in a certain direction.
Yes.
You become more your eyesight, like you push how you view the world in terms of cool and warm tones
hmm
and value, like you were talking about. What color is that really, and how does
hmm
it compare to the color next to it?
Yeah.
Especially for outdoor scenes, you paint a lot of outdoor scenes with the
Yeah.
natural lighting. There's a lot of greenery. How does the greenery compare to the greenery next to it? And the
Yeah.
trees next to the bush, next to the grass,
Yes.
and, creating depth and this lifelike look to it.
Mm-hmm.
The subtle tones in wedding gown. I mean, I just am in love with color, and I love using a more limited palette. I did a painting recently where I took out like all my brightest colors
Mm-hmm.
and really focused on light and shadow,
Mm-hmm.
like in a weird way. It was a really fun challenge, and it was for a corporate job. So it was for a job. It wasn't just for funsies,
Yeah.
but it was one way to stretch those muscles. And
Mm-hmm.
I think artists should do a little bit more of that. And in a way, it saves time. You're doing a little bit more mixing, but you're learning as you go, and you're making better decisions with every challenge. Every job you're doing, you're making better decisions. You
Mm-hmm.
know what colors, the difference between like phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, and cobalt.
Yeah.
And you know what it looks like mixed with white, and what
Mm-hmm.
it's you learn and you become a better artist by practicing, like you
Mm-hmm.
said.
And I find that sometimes I switch up my palette with different paintings based on the feel. So sometimes I'll introduce yellow ochre instead, and
Yes.
it gives more of like a traditional feel. If I've got like a really bright sunny day, I'll bring out my brighter yellows and reds and, bring in the cadmiums. And then if I'm doing something a little bit more moody, so at the moment I'm going to butcher, I can never say this, alizarin crimson.
Alizarin.
Alizarin. I'm so bad at saying that one. At the moment, I'm doing like a rainy day painting. And every single color I'm mixing, and this is like a cool little tip if you're listening, every single color I'm mixing, I'm putting a tiny bit of that red in there. And it's almost like applying a filter to the painting. It creates uniformity in every single color. So in all the greens, I have that red. In even all the yellows, I have that red. Even just a tiny little bit, and it's like putting a glaze on the top, but you're mixing it in as you go.
It neutralizes it because like a gloomy, moody, rainy kind of day, it's
Mm-hmm.
very blue, it's very
Yeah,
gray.
yeah,
And so yeah, oh my gosh, what a great tip.
yeah, yeah. And I did that with my yellow ochre painting, where it was Melbourne. It was like the traditional buildings of Melbourne. So I just brought that color into everything, and it just tied everything together. Yeah.
So many tricks. I used to be so scared. I mean, terrified to bring oil paints to a wedding or an event that I was painting at, until I realized that Gamblin has me covered with all of the mediums, the paint thinner, the varnish, the whole gambit. I love using Gamsol as an odorless paint thinner. Okay, this is what I use to wash my brushes to thin the paint. I use a big jug of that to slow the drying time. If I'm trying to finish a painting and layer and do all of that, I use Galkid. It's a very thick medium that I love to use with my oil paints. And let's say it's very dry, it's a very hot and dry environment. I love to slow the drying time with refined linseed oil. This is my medium of choice for my oil paints. And when the painting is dry and I'm ready to send it off to the client, I varnish it with Gamvar, high gloss. That's my preference. And Gamblin has you covered with your preference as well. You can visit their website, www.gamblincolors.com. That's spelled GAMBLIN colors.com, or you can click the link in the show notes to shop my preference for oil painting mediums. Check them out and thank me later. I love hearing the tricks, because you have to create, I mean, it is a bucket of tricks. Like live wedding painting, you have to make a painting somehow in a short amount of time. What decisions are you making? And so I love hearing everybody's like, ooh, here's my little tip that I use. And your tip lends to your style, and my tips lend to my style, and Maggie's her own. I love Maggie's work. It's so high contrast and it's
Yeah.
so illustrative, and I feel like she doesn't layer much, because what she applies, that's what you see, like it works.
Yeah.
And it's very opaque. And I don't know, I feel like everybody has a place. Everybody has their work, it matters.
Definitely. Definitely.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, wait, I have more questions.
Okay.
I have a few more. You recently had a baby. Congratulations.
Yeah,
And
thank
by
you.
recently, I know she's over a year old, but that's recent.
It is.
That's a
It
new
is.
baby.
Feels like yesterday.
I know you've worked a lot before that, and you took on a lot of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how was have you ever, I know this is kind of rhetorical, but answer it anyway. Have you ever experienced burnout? And if so, what did you do to keep yourself motivated during and after that? And then also after your break, like,
Yeah.
if you can give me kind of a quicker version
Yeah.
for the sake of time, but I am curious.
Burnout has absolutely happened. My biggest thing with burnout is I need to create a challenge so that I feel creatively inspired. So instead of going to a wedding and picking the easiest shot, I push myself a little bit. And then as that painting unfolds, it gives me that spark again of what I was missing. Because when you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again, it just becomes a little bit tired and old. And at some point, you just feel like you're creating for the sake of creating. But yeah, now I go into every wedding, and this is really where the lighting comes into it. I'm so inspired by lighting. So when I realized that after my first little bout of burnout, now I try and bring that lighting into every painting. And I'm like, I get excited hunting for the lighting at the wedding, and then I get equally as excited to start touching up the painting, like to figure out where it's going to go. And I like showing up to a wedding having no idea what I'm going to paint. Like that's like the best thing for me. And after my little bout, when I was away from live wedding painting a little bit after I had my daughter, it was hard to get back into things because I went from 0 weddings until I was 7 weeks postpartum to like 8 to 9 a month. And there was no sort of like lead up to that. And my first ever wedding back, I had like 2.5 hours sleep, and I just felt emotionally burnt out. So like going to a wedding was hard. Like I was standing in the ceremony and I was so tired. And I was like, how am I going to get through this night? And it was up in the mountains. And I didn't finish the painting that night. It got to a point where I kind of knew that if I kept going with it, I would start ruining it because I was so exhausted. So I just decided to let the bride and groom know it was done at that point. And I took it home and, kept it in the cupboard for 2 weeks until I felt up to touching it because it was just too much at the time. And then I worked on that for like 2 to 3 weeks, just sort of chipping away at it when I had a spare hour to myself. But yeah, it was definitely hard to get back into things. I think it probably took 1 or 2 months before I felt like I was really back in the swing of things. And it was strange painting again after not painting for like 2 months, when before I'd been painting for like 1.5 years or 2 years straight. So yeah, that was weird. It was definitely strange.
Do you think that if you were to take another break, you would take a real break, or just like do one, like just do 4 a month, like one a weekend or something, like ease into that break?
So I've decided that if this were to happen again, I would do like 2 a month for like 2 months, and then 3 a month for the next month, and then 4 a month, and then slowly build my way up to 6. But probably for the first 6 months, I would just do 4 a month, just so I have that balance of not feeling guilty for taking time away from my baby. Because I had this conflicting guilt of like, the paintings need to be done, but you've got a baby, and they don't go together. I tried baby wearing at one point, and I dipped her head in the palette, and then she had like all this oil paint on the back of her head, and it was so hard to get out, and I felt so bad.
I know other moms make it look so easy, just carrying their babies all over the place. My babies like push away from me. They hated it. And I felt so bad. Like this should have been I was hoping this would work out, and it didn't, but that's okay. We found other solutions.
Yeah. Distractions.
Yeah, distractions help, like I definitely I came from I was homeschooled, and I'm from a large family, and my mom took care of us all. We was very hands-on, whatever, and here I am. And so that's, to me, that was a wonderful way to do it, right? To be a mother and raise a family. And that's kind of that was my standard. And here I am working from home during the week, and then being gone pecan on the weekend, like out of state, getting on a plane, and then having babies at home and trying to nurse, but then needing someone to be here and help, like finding the balance between, are we going to have a sitter just play, like hold the baby in the other room, or, and then daycares, and then we had more babies, and, then it's the toddler and having a toddler, it's very much a unique situation, and everybody has their own situation. Everybody has their own availability of help. And so I think it's important for everybody to really take into account what they want and what feels right for their families, because what is right for you is not right for me, and what's right for me may not be right for you. And, there's no wrong, I don't know. Yes, there's a wrong way to do it, I'm sure, but don't feel, I don't know. I feel like I want to just share that you're doing great. It doesn't matter, like just make sure that you are making time for your family, and, step back from work or get some more help with the kids, and take it one day at a time, and make sure you get that rest.
Oh, the rest is so important.
As you know, like if you're sleep deprived, if you're sleep deprived, then you will get sick. But like creatively, you're an empty cup. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I was very lucky. I kind of early on, I realized I had to create a divide in my brain for creative me and home life me. So even when I was really tired in my home life, because like my baby wasn't sleeping or whatever, my creativity was really protected, and I just really made sure they could not overlap in any way. Like I decided not to try painting if I had my baby with me. I would have to make sure someone was here, just so that the paintings had the time they deserved, but also my baby had the time she deserved. I wasn't always splitting my attention. That was such a big thing, but it worked. It really helped. Like even now it works.
Yeah, it does. I do the same thing. I can't work. I actually have all these huge canvases that I will put up in front of my doors if my kids are home and I have to work.
Yeah.
Chris will be here, or I'll have a babysitter. And that way they can't see me, because if they see me, it's game over.
Yeah, definitely.
And I can put AirPods in. Like I can, when you have 3, you do have to work. But when you have a baby, there's no overlap. You're absolutely right. You have to separate. But that's really good advice too. Be present with the family, with the baby, and then allow yourself to dive in to the job.
Yeah.
I have to ask you, because sometimes I feel guilty for feeling this way, but at the same time, it really helps me be able to do what I love. When I'm at a wedding, I forget I have kids. And then people will ask me, how are the girls? And then it'll come rushing back on top of me. And I'm like, oh, they're so great. And then I want to show them pictures, and it literally like rushes back. And then I have to like climb out of the realization, like where, being under the shroud of being a mother and having these children. And do you do that too?
Yes. I feel like when I'm at a wedding, I revert straight back to 26-year-old me. I don't need to go home. I don't need to be home before midnight. Like I'm all good. And then I'll meet another supplier who's like, oh, how's your baby going? And I'm like, wait, what? I am a mum. I don't feel like a mum. I feel like I've got a little friend. But yeah, it's so weird. And then all of a sudden you pull out the phone and you're like, oh, look how cute she is. And then you start missing them. And then you want to be home with them. Like the phone is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Never with
it really
photos.
Is. And I love talking about them. Like I really do. And they are so cute.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when I'm in my zone, I forget I have kids.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I mean, it's fine. And then as soon as I get in the car, I look at the videos my husband sends me. He'll take the selfies with them, and he'll take a video of them all saying "Good night, Mama," and then doing like the kiss.
Oh yeah,
and then I'm just in tears, and I'm like, okay, coming home.
Yep. That's exactly what happens. Like it's the dinner time I missed when, she was playing peekaboo and putting pasta sauce all over her face. And I'm like, I'm kind of glad I didn't have to clean that up, but also I wish I was there. It's so strange.
The husbands are lucky that they get a little bit of one-on-one time with them, though. That's how I see it.
Exactly.
They see it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting dynamic, but it works for us.
It
Sounds like it's
does,
working for you
does,
too.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Rebekka, you are so cool. I'm so glad that you were here. Thank you. Thank you for hanging out with me today.
Hopefully when I come to the US one day, I can come visit you properly in person.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Are we planning a US tour?
Fingers crossed next year. Next year? No, 2026. I'm sorry. In my mind, next year is 2026. Yeah. Planning for mid.
Well, yeah, because we plan a year in advance, and so 2026 is.
It is next
year. Yeah.
It totally is. Yes, so fingers crossed 2026 mid-year is when it's planned. And hopefully it'll be for 1 to 2 months.
That is thrilling.
Yes.
I'm so excited. I hope that we get to see each other in person when you're here.
I know.
Until then, can our listeners follow you and watch your beautiful and entertaining and inspiring reels?
And educational. It is at The Wedding Painter on Instagram. So the.wedding.painter. And then on TikTok, it is BEK.LJ.
And then what is your website so people can find you online?
theweddingpainter.com.au.
.au. Perfect.
Yes.
Just add Australia to it, you guys.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out. We should do this again very soon.
Yes.
Maybe next time, at a different hour. But I know, I'm thoroughly enjoyed it. And no, don't be sorry at all. My kids have been sleeping the whole time.
Oh, good.
I had the monitor right here, and I was like willing them to not wake up, and they didn't.
They
did it. It worked out. Oh my gosh. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yes,
and
too.
Best of luck with your wedding this weekend. I can't wait to see it.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me. And if you're listening to this episode on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or you've been watching along on YouTube, I hope you've had just as much fun as we have had. Please leave a review. If I could ask you for that one little favor, sharing a review, dropping us a few stars, maybe 5 stars. It's the best way for us to show up in the rankings, and it's the best way for people to find the podcast and listen to wonderful conversations like the one we had today with Rebekka. I will see you guys next week. Bye for now. See you, Rebekka.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in and joining us on this journey of artistic exploration, entrepreneurial growth, and personal development. Remember, you have the power to create a life that is both fulfilled and balanced. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe to The Composed Artist on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And don't forget to leave us a review. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more creatives like you. Until next time, keep creating, keep dreaming, and keep pursuing that composed life. You got this.